All right, it's time to talk about some scary things with our aquariums. Hey everyone, I'm Zenzo with Tazawa Tanks, and today I want to talk about some things that are not so great that could happen in the aquarium hobby. So we're going to cover 5 things that I think are kind of scary, dangerous, difficult to deal with. So let's go ahead and jump right into the first one, which is probably the one that worries most of us and is probably the most frequently occurring issue, and that's a power outage. When it comes to power outage, having a plan is important. What are you going to use to ensure that your life support systems stay running? You're not going to need lights to keep the plants going. They'll be fine for several days without lights. Your fish don't need the lights on. Mainly what you want to do is you want to ensure that you have some type of aeration going on in your aquarium so that your fish do not suffocate from lack of oxygen. So you want to have something that is not reliant upon being plugged into the wall so that you can have that oxygenation happening in your aquarium. Now in my situation, I have so many tanks that I can't rely upon just battery backup. So I have a generator. So if you have a lot of aquariums or if you have something that's complex, you might want to invest in a generator. Now, when it comes to power outages, mostly you don't need to worry about it if it's going to be short. You're probably fine, don't worry about it, just keep an eye on it, be home, and you might not need to do anything. It's usually when the power's out for a lengthy period of time that's when you're going to have an issue, unless your tank is overstocked. So in those situations, you're going to want to address it sooner than later. And then lastly, if there's any type of extreme temperature, you want to make sure that you're able to mitigate huge swings in temperature. So if your tanks are normally at 78 degrees and the power's cut out for a day, and that's a little bit cooler and the temperature drops down to 72 or 70 degrees, they're going to be fine. They're not going to freeze. That is going to be if you're like, again, in winter time, there's an ice storm, the temperature's dropping down to 40 or 50 degrees in the house and that water temperature is dropping. That's when you're going to want to make sure that you can keep the heat. So putting lids on the aquarium are very important. That's going to trap the heat. You can wrap your aquarium in blankets. Then obviously, if it's a lengthy period of time, you could heat up water on a stove and put a little bit of warm water back in a tank and do something you have to manually do. And then in the opposite end of the spectrum, and it gets to be 100 degrees in the home, again, your tank is gonna take some time to change in temperature. Taking off the lid, making sure that any heat in the aquarium escapes is a good thing to do. And then you can take things like frozen water bottles and float that frozen water in the tank, and it's kind of acting like a little ice cube essentially, and keeping the temperature a little bit cooler. Just make sure that you have a plan, that you have something in place to address temperature if you live in an area where that's going to be an issue, but definitely you want to make sure that your power is addressed with aeration. Now the next scary thing is probably the scariest thing, and it's the one thing that I worry about more than anything else, and that's a tank breaking or leaking. There's actually a trick that you can do that a lot of people don't know about. What you want to do is you want to use a plastic bag or some type of plastic sheeting to plug up the hole where that leak is happening, but you want to do it from the inside. Any pressure from the aquarium is pushing against that plastic and it's plugging up that hole. Having extra aquariums is always nice to have, so I have a few extra aquariums laying around that I kind of keep hidden, and in the event of something happening, I can quickly swap out an aquarium and pull out the fish and put them in some kind of temporary situation. But you want to make sure that you address the leak right away from the inside out. Now if a tank breaks and like there's a huge like hole, then plastic's not gonna, that's not going to plug up the hole quick enough. So in that situation, make sure that you have a shop vac so you can suck up water, you don't have floor damage. I have towels nearby, so if something does happen, I can quickly grab a couple large towels and kind of mop up or soak up some water. Now the next scary thing is probably something that happens more often than you might realize, and that's an ammonia spike. Now ammonia is a harmful byproduct of waste in the aquarium, and elevated levels of ammonia can be harmful to fish. So if you have ammonia that's too high, your fish could get burned from it and they could also die. So you want to make sure that you're testing your water to ensure that the water parameters stay in a healthy range and that you don't have excess ammonia and nitrates. So the easiest thing to do with an ammonia increase or spike is to do a water change. You want to take some of that water out of the aquarium with the elevated ammonia levels and then put in fresh water that doesn't have ammonia in it. The other thing that you can do is you can add an additive that will bind the ammonia and make it less toxic. So using a product like Fritz Complete or Seachem Prime, things like that, they will actually bond and kind of encapsulate the ammonia and make it less toxic. They basically detoxify the ammonia for a short period of time. Ultimately, what you want to do is you want to avoid having ammonia build up in the first place. So making sure that you're not overfeeding, making sure that you don't have a lot of decomposing wood or rotting leaves in your aquarium, or too many of them. In some cases, you might want to have some of that for tannins if you're keeping softer water fish, but you want to make sure that you're monitoring it and you don't have too much of it. And lastly, live aquarium plants. If you have excess ammonia, but you have lots of plants in there, they will actually absorb the ammonia and the phosphates and the nitrates that's occurring in the aquarium and will help to naturally purify the water. Number 4 on the scary things list is a pH crash. Now, when you have a pH crash, that means that the pH level is dropping rapidly or has dropped rapidly, and it's dropping below 7, and it's getting into that 6 range, 6.5, 6.0. And if it gets too low, it can be very dangerous and can also burn the fish because it's acid. Now, one common thing with a pH crash is that it could be a result of poor aeration. Making sure that you have aeration in your aquarium is going to help out. So I always like to use sponge filters or air stones in all of my aquariums, and it's going to mitigate an excess buildup of CO2. So it is important to check your equipment to make sure if you are using sponge filters and air stones that you're servicing them, that they're not getting clogged, that the flow is not slowing down too much, because that could be a cause for the pH crash. Now, another reason for the pH crash could be, like ammonia, some excess decay happening in the aquarium. You want to make sure that you don't have excess decaying matter. Again, that wood, that plant litter could also be affecting your pH, making that water more acidic. What you can do is you can obviously remove some of those. So if you have a lot of wood in there, take out a lot of it and just have a little bit. If you have a lot of leaves in there, take out some and just have a few leaves, and then do a partial water changing. And then lastly, there's a couple more things that you can do to ensure that you don't have pH crashes. One of those things is going to be to use some type of buffer. So I happen to use like cichlid buffer, basically increase the buffering capacity of the water and add those minerals and salts back into the water to keep the pH levels where I want them to be. And then also using a product like crushed coral or aragonite can be very helpful. The last scary thing, costs. So the amount of money that you are spending in the aquarium hobby could get out of hand, and that could be scary. If you have what we call multiple tank syndrome, and maybe you're new to fish keeping and you don't understand what that is, and you've got your first tank, you're gonna get another one soon. And after you get that one, you're gonna want another one. And that's where costs really get out of hand. So there's a few things that you can do to make sure that you're not going crazy with the wallet and not wasting your money. Now, the first thing to do is just don't buy too many aquariums. What I would recommend is to really try to dial in and perfect the aquariums that you have. Now, there are things that you can do regardless of how many tanks that you have. So when it comes to energy consumption, think about things like heat. So if you have a heater in your aquarium that's plugged in all the time, making your energy bill increase. So if you use things like aquarium lids, that's going to help to reduce the amount of heat leaving the aquarium. If you do have multiple tank syndrome, and if you have a lot of tanks, my advice is to put them in one area so that you can heat the room rather than having to have 50 heaters. Another thing to think about is lights. So lights on your aquarium are drawing energy. The fish don't need the light, just the regular ambient light in the room, unless you're in a basement like we are here and it's dark if you don't have the lights on. If you're like in any regular home with a window, the ambient light is just fine. If you have plants, yes, they need light, but they don't need light for 12 hours a day. So I would recommend making sure that all of your aquariums are on a timer. or that you're very prudent in making sure that you're turning the lights on and off. So if you're gone all day at work or at school or whatever, don't leave the lights on. Just have the lights on when you're home enjoying the fish. Using air-driven filters is going to be more economical. So I use sponge filters in all of my aquariums here, and you'll notice that when you go to a fish store or you see a wholesaler or a breeder, they're all using air because it's economical. A couple more things that you can do to reduce cost would be to use things like live plants. The live plants in the aquarium are going to help with the water quality. They're going to absorb the nitrates and any excess waste that might be happening in your aquarium, which means that you're using less water, which means your water bill could be less. And then another thing that you can do is just have less fish. It's less fish to feed, it's less waste, so you're doing less water changes, you don't have to worry about all these other things. So just maybe being more selective with the amount of fish that you have, having less, enjoying them more, will help to save some money. Hopefully this is helping you in kind of understanding how to avoid some of these dangers or scary things, and hopefully it'll save you money. You can avoid any catastrophes down the road. So anyway, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, all that good stuff, and yeah, check out this video right here.